embroidery hoop consists of 2 hoops. To separate the two, unscrew the top. Place your fabric over the inner hoop and the outer hoop back over the top and tighten the screw. Be sure to block the fabric onto the hoop by removing the slack from the center. Your fabric should be taut like a drum. The best fabrics to use are those with a lower thread count, as they will allow the needle to pass through easily. I am using muslin in this tutorial. Floss is the term used to describe embroidery thread. For this project, I will be using 6-strand floss. DMC floss is one of the most commonly used, but you can find more budget-friendly alternatives at your local dollar store for the purpose of learning. Your floss should be no longer than an arm's length to start. 6 strands are typically twisted together to form a single thread of floss. You can embroider with all 6 strands or separate the strands as I am showing here. Separating will give you a sleek end product. However, it truly depends on the look you're going for. I'm going to thread my needle, securing my floss with a simple knot at the end and around the eye of the needle. This helps the floss to stay on the needle longer. Let's go. The most basic of all embroidery stitches is the running stitch. It is most useful when outlining a design. To create a running stitch, begin by pushing your threaded needle upwards through the fabric to anchor your knot. We will be creating stitches by using the stab stitch method, so get all your frustration out in this one. Your stitches should be no longer than 1/4 of an inch, being sure to leave a small gap in between stitches. To create a knot to secure your stitch, grab no more than 2 threads of your fabric with your needle. Before pushing your needle through, grab the floss that is coming from the eye of the needle and wrap it under the tip of the needle. Pull through to secure. Repeat one more time in the same spot. Unlike the running stitch, the backstitch creates one continuous line of thread. It's great when creating word designs or for outlining a design. Start by pushing the needle up through the fabric and going one stitch forward, poking the needle back down again using that same stab stitch method. Next, poke the needle up about one stitch length in front of the first stitch. Pull the needle up and then go back towards the first stitch and poke the needle through the end of the previous stitch. The chain stitch is another great way to outline and add texture. Start by pulling your needle up through the fabric, step right next to that point with your needle, scooping back up one stitch. Make sure the floss is placed underneath the needle before pulling your needle through and away from you, much like how we created a knot. To secure your chain, push your needle down on the outside of the loop. The stem stitch got its name because it's commonly used to create stems of flowers or vines. It's also great to use when creating cursive words or anything with curves. First, create a regular stitch. Before pulling the loop all the way through, come back up half or 1/3 of the way. It's entirely up to you. To keep the stitch nice and neat, it's important to note which side of the stitch you are coming up on and be consistent. The satin stitch is used to fill shapes. The satin finish is created using side-by-side stitching. I will be showing you two methods, the first being the most expensive. It helps to find the center of the area you are filling to keep the stitches balanced throughout. First, start by creating a single stitch. Next, push your needle up and then down again, this time keeping as close to the first stitch as possible. Continue creating as many stitches this way until you have completed the shape you want to create. In this case, we are creating a triangle. The second method yields the same result. The only difference is when you push your needle down, you will push it back up right next to it as though you're playing hopscotch with your needle. Let's take a look at the back to see the difference. Comment down below which method you prefer. The long and short stitch and satin stitch are quite similar. However, this stitch is better for designs with multiple variegated colors and subtleties in design. The seed stitch is a really fun stitch to use to decorate. It often resembles rice, confetti, and sprinkles. This is a modified running stitch that can be randomized throughout your design. French knots are so fun to make. They're often used as decorative accents and create interesting fillers in a design. First, bring the needle up through the fabric. Next, wrap the floss 1 to 3 times around the needle, depending on what size of knot you'd like to create. Holding the floss taut, push the needle back down immediately next to the first hole and push all the way through. Continue creating as many knots as you wish. The more twists, the bigger the knot. The Lazy Daisy is such a cute decorative element. We will be creating this in the same way we formed the chain stitch, this time forming single petals. Start by creating a 5-pointed star as your base. Coming up from the center, begin weaving the needle over and under, alternating between each peg until the 5-pointed star is completely covered. Be sure not to weave too tight, as this will allow for a fuller and more textured look. Once you've completely covered the 5 pegs of the star, tuck the needle somewhere under the design, pulling the needle all the way through to the back until the thread disappears.